1963, Baha'u'llah declared his mission. He founded the Baghai faith, teaching about universal peace, universal education, gender equality, and the oneness of humanity. In 1982, 10 women who lived their lives according to those beliefs were arrested by the Iranian religious authorities. These are their stories.
My name is Roya Eshraghi. My parents, Inayatullah and Izzat, married in 1948. They settled in the city of Shiraz in Iran, famous for legendary poets and extraordinary gardens. Little by little, their family expanded up to 5 children. My parents' constant and affectionate love for one another, and all of us, provided a bedrock of unwavering support for myself and my siblings. I was the 4th of 5 children. As I grew older, I found myself torn between the example of my siblings, who had ventured abroad to seek higher education and career opportunities, and my desire to stay close to my parents. All our lives were shaped by participation in our faith community. This included occasions marked by the Baha'i calendar, as well as the fundamental values which the Baha'i faith upholds, such as equality of men and women and the oneness of humanity. The year 1979 marked an abrupt turning point for our family, and indeed our whole nation. Following the Iranian Revolution, the country was transformed from a monarchy ruled by the Shah into a theocracy ruled by clergy. My father's pension was cut off, and I was expelled from university. Both of these actions were solely due to being Baha'i. The persecution of Baha'is soon progressed to mass arrests, torture, and even executions. Those dark days cast a shadow of fear over my siblings living abroad, who urged us to leave the country. But my parents, my younger sister, and I chose to stand in solidarity with those of our faith community and remain in Iran. My parents emphasized to me the value placed by the Baha'i faith on service to others, as well as education for all. I began teaching children's classes and became an active member of a youth committee. We hoped that by living the teachings of our faith, we could make a positive difference. On the fateful day of November 29th, 1982, my family's world shattered. Our home was raided and searched by the Revolutionary Guards for 3 agonizing hours. The discovery of Baha'i literature and books led to the arrest of my father, my mother, and myself. I found myself in the Sepah detention center with my mother, while my father was confined in some other place. The prison guards forced us into repeated, lengthy interrogations. During these harrowing interrogations, they sought to break our spirit. For me, this was by claiming that my parents had renounced their faith. Repeatedly, they tried to pressure me to recant my beliefs as well, They even went so far as to subject me to mock execution.
As Roya's mother, the months confined within the prison walls with my daughter were a blend of bitterness and sweetness. Witnessing her unwavering commitment to her beliefs filled me with pride, a testament to the strength instilled in her. Yet a heavy sorrow clung to my heart as I mourned the stolen normalcy of youth, those carefree moments that should have been hers. I knew there was a possibility that we might not emerge from this prison. I found myself compelled to make peace with the harsh reality that the life I had envisioned for my cherished child might be cut short.
One day, the judge, Hojjatul Islam Khazai, gave me an ultimatum: choose Islam or face a death sentence. I smiled and calmly responded, I accept Islam, but I am a Baghai. The judge, exasperated, retorted, get lost. As directed, I left his presence, but in a moment of defiance, I re-entered the room, saying, sorry, sir, for wasting your time. Goodbye. The judge's fury felt palpable.
Tragedy struck. My youngest daughter visited us in prison 2 days after what should have been her wedding day. Instead, she brought news of calamity. My husband had been hanged. We knew it was a possibility from the time he had been arrested. Still, the harsh reality and not having been allowed to say goodbye to my life partner and father of my children was devastating. We took comfort in the confirmation that this news proved that he had chosen to go to his death rather than recant and live.
After receiving this devastating news, we were headed back to our ward when the guards redirected my mother, myself, and 8 other Baghai women. They placed us on a minibus bound for Chogan Square. There, we beheld the gallows. I thought of my father's example. I witnessed my beloved mother's example and those of my last companions in that terrible square, and I declined. My mother was aged 57, and I only 23, when we departed this earthly life together, united in our beliefs.
My name is Simin Saberi. I entered this world on March 2nd, 1959, into a family where multiple faith traditions converged. My father, originating from a Muslim family, came across and joined the Baha'i faith through personal exploration. Meanwhile, my mother, of Jewish descent, witnessed her parents likewise discover and investigate the Baha'i faith before ultimately choosing to embrace it. I am the youngest among 5 siblings. We were close, and our home often echoed with laughter. Our parents fostered a vibrant and warm family environment, which made up for the need to repeatedly uproot us for economic reasons. My early years were marked by nomadic existence, residing in various cities across Iran, until we eventually settled in the city of Shiraz. Lovely Shiraz, long attractive to Persians and visitors alike, as the birthplace of beloved poets Hafez and Saadi, famous for beauty of its gardens and exquisite styles of carpet. But also, as we came to learn, the seat of some especially intense fear-mongering by local clergy against religious minorities, in particular the Baghai community. This led to a turning point in our lives. On December 16th, 1978, chaos erupted outside our family home. A mob gathered, voices raised in anger and threats, when suddenly stones were hurled and just kept coming and coming. All our home's windows shattered, and we feared that the mob would burst inside. We fled into the night, with nothing but the clothes on our backs, and myself, even without shoes. When we stopped to pause for a breath after the first overwhelming rush, I realized that my feet were bleeding. We sought refuge in Tehran. After a month, we cautiously decided to return. We discovered our home had been confiscated by the religious authorities and were informed that we had no legal recourse. We moved forward as best we could, since we had no other option. Then, in 1979, came the revolution, and our lives were shaken again. After leaving school, I trained as a secretary and began my working life. But once the Muslim clergy came to power, I lost my job, solely because of my membership in the Baghai community. In the aftermath, I joined our local Baghai Education Committee and focused my energy on deepening fellow community members in the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Life was challenging, but we all hoped for the best and carried on as best we could. October 24th, 1982, etched the start of an even darker chapter. I returned home to find Revolutionary Guards waiting for me to put me under arrest. From that moment, I became a prisoner, enduring harsh conditions first in the Sabet detention center and later also in the Ali Abad prison. The circumstances were grim, yet I found solace in the company of other women detainees of my faith community, who offered calm and comforting words amidst our ongoing adversity. The crimes with which I was charged were being a Baha'i, organizing Baha'i activities, and refusing to recant. These charges and accusations, framed by the Revolutionary Guards and interrogators as punishable offenses, could never be negative in my eyes, and so did not cause me fear. Throughout my imprisonment, I did my utmost to remain resilient and a source of encouragement to my companions in their occasional and understandable moments of despair. Prayer became my refuge, deepening my connection to my Creator. On June 18, 1983, 10 of us were selected for transportation out of the prison. It is likely that we all suspected that ride would not conclude with our release back to our families. So as we deboarded the bus and were confronted with the starkness of the gallows in the public square, I was not consumed by fear. When my turn came, as my companions before me had done, I declined the option to recant my beliefs and save my life. Instead, I recited my favorite prayer from Abdul Baha and stepped forward to my last earthly breath. I departed this physical life at age 24, alongside 9 remarkable Baha'i women. Our joint legacy was to leave behind an unwavering conviction that faith, steadfastness, and courage are more precious than physical freedom.
My name is Akhtar Sabet. My journey began in Sarvistan. This ancient village is known as Iran's leading pistachio producer. This made my childhood springtimes magical, with swirling blankets of pink, white, and red pistachio blossoms wafting their sweet, delicate scent. Until the 9th grade, I happily immersed myself in school, cherishing the simplicity of my early years. But by 1978, approaching storm clouds cast a chill upon the Baha'i community of Sarvistan. The social and political forces that would ultimately reach their crescendo in the Iranian Revolution the following year were foreshadowed by threats of violence against religious minorities instigated by some of the Muslim clergy. Along with others, my family felt compelled to flee our ancestral home and search for sanctuary in the closest large city, Shiraz. Driven by a desire to ease the financial strain on my family, I took on various odd jobs. Navigating those tumultuous times became increasingly challenging. Nevertheless, in between the efforts to meet the demands of sheer economic survival, I continued with my education. If anything, I felt an increased passion to pursue academic excellence and began studying to become a nurse. When I finally qualified, I embraced the opportunity to contribute to society by working at the Sadi Hospital in Shiraz in the children's wing. By then, the revolution had convulsed all parts of Iranian society and swept away my dreams of postgraduate studies. My work in the hospital was fulfilling to me and, according to them, meaningful to my patients and their families. I took much comfort in that. As time went on, we kept hearing disturbing news from different parts of the country about our brothers and sisters in faith, questioning, arrests, imprisonments, even torture, and the worst, disappearances. People gone from one day to the next, never to return, no information provided for their distraught and grieving families. On October 22, 1982, we suddenly heard a new to us, yet instantly recognizable din, the terrifying noise of our door being broken down. I was seized and forcibly taken to a detention center and subjected to interrogation. The charges brought against me were steep. Being a Baghai, participating in Baghai administration, and being single. Eventually, I was allowed to join some fellow inmates in a group cell, all likewise Baghai women incarcerated on similar charges as mine, for actions we considered innocent but classified as criminal by the religious authorities. The walls of the cell were damp and moldy. Drawing on my nursing skills, I spent my days tending to the wounds of my cellmates, doing my best to ensure minimal cleanliness could prevail amidst the deplorable conditions in which we lived. When they learned of my arrest and ongoing incarceration, my supervisors at Sadi Hospital pleaded with the prison authorities for my release and return to hospital service. The authorities remained unyielding, demanding I renounce my faith as the condition for release, a price I was not willing to pay. In the winter of 1983, a judge sealed my fate, delivering a death sentence which was upheld by the Supreme Court. My family remained unaware of the court's decision, and I faced the impending darkness without them. June 18, 1983 marked the next point in my journey. I was transferred to a military base known as Chogon. There, I bore witness to the sentence outcomes of some of my prison companions. The sentences were not carried out simultaneously, but rather, one by one, a cruel spectacle intended to break our spirits and provide each successive prisoner with a final opportunity to escape their so visibly waiting fate and recant. But none of those ahead of me took that escape, and when it came to my turn, neither did I. Facing my remaining compatriots for the last time on this earth, I tried to offer them soothing words in the same spirit I had offered them soothing physical care. Never mind, I am not worried. Whatever happens, I am satisfied with the will of God. I was 25. I had no time to collect any worldly goods to leave for my loved ones. All I was able to offer was resilience in the face of relentless pressure and a purified commitment to my beliefs. May my family and my Creator be content with this legacy.
When I came into this world, I was given the name Shahin, but it didn't stick. Everyone immediately began calling me Shirin, a Persian term meaning sweet. As I grew, I developed a love of learning. After completing high school, I eagerly went on to Pahlavi University in the field of sociology. My studies were abruptly cut short. When the Islamic Revolution toppled the Persian monarchy and swept the clergy to power, all universities across the country were closed. Uncertainty and unrest seized the land. In the wake of this upheaval, mirroring numerous fellow citizens, my own family opted for emigration. When the universities eventually reopened, my father and I returned to Iran from Britain, and I dedicated myself to making up for lost time. I graduated with distinction. My dissertation on addiction garnered commendations and an invitation to participate in a television program. That invitation was revoked once the organizers discovered I was a Baghai. My father returned to the United Kingdom, but I felt a strong inclination to stay in Iran with my grandmother. In my father's absence, I took charge of managing his business affairs in Shiraz. I also devoted much time to visiting and offering solace to the families of fellow Baha'is in Shiraz who faced imprisonment or execution under the new regime. On the 29th of November, 1982, a friend and I went to visit a Baha'i family whose husband was recently imprisoned. On the way home, we noticed a man following us. At my friend's home, I called my grandmother to say I would stay overnight. Suddenly, revolutionary guards banged on the door and a contingent of agents forcefully entered the property. Without producing any warrants, they searched the home, confiscated books and pictures, and arrested my friend and I. We were taken to Sepah Detention Center, where we endured repeated hostile interrogations and a barrage of harassment and mistreatment. The dual objectives were clear: to attempt to coerce us into renouncing our faith and force us to divulge the identities of fellow Baha'i community members. I did my best to remain calm and polite, despite escalating threats and acts of violence perpetrated by the interrogators. About a month after my arrest, I was moved to Adilabad prison. There, I again underwent questioning, this time by an examining magistrate who warned that continuing refusal to renounce my faith could lead to a death penalty. My bail was set at 500,000 tomans, a huge sum. With the utmost difficulty, my grandmother managed to gather the funds, but when she brought it to the court, she was told the bail had been canceled. Disheartening for me, but devastating for my poor grandmother, unable to improve my circumstances as she had so desperately hoped. The prison warden decreed that access to Baha'i prisoners was restricted to immediate relatives, and this did not include grandparents. I found myself the sole Baha'i inmate, enduring prolonged absence of visitors. It wasn't until one fortuitous day, after the departure of all other visitors, that I was finally summoned and allowed a fleeting moment of bliss, seeing my grandmother after months of separation. It was the most cherished moment throughout my incarceration. My trial unfolded in mere minutes, devoid of any legal representation. The judge confronted me with the mere stark ultimatum: Islam or death. I had had a long time to think about what I might say in this situation. I stated, I hope that with the grace of God, I will remain resolute in my faith until the last moment of my life. This seemed to irk the judge. His response was an angry outburst, retorting, "Your death has nothing to do with the grace of God. Do you seek execution?" His words did not change my mind. 7 months after my arrest, I found myself at Shogun Square. The judge's warning became reality. I faced capital punishment by hanging, alongside 9 Baghai companions. I was 26, younger than I would have guessed, if anyone had asked me just a few years before. But in a small way, I was given a chance to go on a little longer. When the City Council of Newcastle in England, where my family still resided, learned of the circumstances of my execution in that grim and empty square, they decided to pay tribute to those events by naming a park in my memory. Instead of Shahin Dalvand, they called it Shirin Irani Park, a place of birds and blossoms and trees and life.
My name is Tahereh Arjomandi Siyavashi. I was born into the hustle and bustle of Tehran, a city teeming with traffic, excitement, and millions of people. That energy seeped into me, injecting motivation to earn my high school diploma. I also met my future husband, Jamshid. Soon after our wedding, we relocated to the tranquil village of Chandar. Jamshid supported my wish to continue my studies. So, I commuted to Tehran 2 to 3 times a week before graduating from university as a qualified nurse. Our journey led us to the small town of Yassi, where life seemed perfect. I was married to a wonderful man, engaged in a fulfilling job, and surrounded by the natural beauty of that part of the countryside. Recognized as the Nurse of the Year, my happiness seemed dreamlike. The dream shattered with the onset of the Iranian Revolution. I was dismissed from my job in Yassi for being a Baghai. We relocated to Shiraz, where I found employment at a private hospital, only to face dismissal again a year later for the same reason. My brother, who resided in the United States, urged us to flee Iran and apply for refugee status in another country. But Jamshid and I felt it was important to try and serve our homeland. Our homeland soon demonstrated that it did not value that service. In October 1982, Jamshid was arrested. I was in agony, not receiving any word of him nor being allowed to see him. Much later, I learned that he'd been subjected to 6 weeks of solitary confinement. 40 days after Jamshid's arrest, they came back to arrest me too. To my surprise, my overriding sensation wasn't apprehension or fear. It was relief, because I thought being in the same detention facility meant I would finally have the news of Jamshid and hopefully a chance to see him. That first night, while some of the other Baha'i women who'd been arrested the same day as me remained anxiously awake, I dropped straight into sleep, eagerly anticipating our reunion. Alas, it was not coming. My incarceration started in December. Time crept on. My eagerness eroded, and my concern for Jamshid climbed. Finally, in February, the Revolutionary Guards permitted me to see him. Joyfully, I accepted some fruit as gifts from my cellmates to share with him, imagining the sight of his dear face lighting up. But when at last we were ushered into the same room, my dream shattered again. I did not recognize him. It was as if they brought a broken stranger in Jamshid's place. The severity and frequency of attempts by the guards to force him to recant his faith had resulted in such damage, especially to his face, that I could not grasp it was him until he spoke. The extent of his injuries prevented him from consuming the gifted fruit from my cellmates. And so I understood why I had been allowed this all too brief reunion. His condition was so grim that he was not expected to survive. It seemed like maliciously calculated cruelty. Me, whose professional purpose was to relieve the physical pain of others, powerless to ease an iota of suffering of my dearest one. When I returned to my cell, this time I remained sleepless. Against all expectation, somehow Jamshid survived that night, and the next, and a little while longer, until there was cautious hope for his recovery. It was not to be. His death sentence was carried out in June 1983. 2 days later, it was my turn to be herded onto a bus. I took the same short ride to the same somber square. My pain, emotional as well as physical, from the effects of my own interrogations that went beyond verbal abuse, melted away, replaced by the serenity of a new dream. If Jamshid and I could not live together in peace to practice our beliefs, then perhaps it was better to leave this life behind. Jamshid had declined his last chance to continue living because of the price attached, recanting his faith. As I likewise declined to repent for my so-called crimes of religious dissidence, I wondered whether the rope that would take my life and thereby fulfill my new dream of permanent reunion with my husband was the very same noose placed around his neck 2 days before. I was 30 years old.
I am Zarrin Moghimi-Abyaneh. Part of my name comes from the quaint Iranian village, numbering less than 200 households, where I drew my first breath. Just because a settlement is small does not mean the perspective of its inhabitants must be limited. From the time I was little, I had a larger vision, an insatiable curiosity. At 5, I began memorizing religious writings and poems. At 15, I began teaching children's classes. At 21, I graduated with a degree in English literature from the University of Tehran. In every sense, a long way away from Abyaneh village, but my path had yet further to unfold. It led me to employment as a translator in a petrochemical plant with offices in Maravdasht and Shiraz. It was interesting work, providing opportunities to meet many different people. Some of Iranian background like myself, and some from other countries, including native English speakers. All were united in their interest in finding ways to improve Iran's technological and resource development. Then it all came to a crashing halt. The revolution rolled through the nation with the unstoppable force of a tsunami, sweeping over everything in its path with a tidal wave of social, economic, and political turbulence. I was abruptly dismissed from my job due to being a Baghai. My sister, who lived abroad at the time, urged me to leave the country out of concern for my personal safety. I knew my sister's concern was not exaggerated. Nevertheless, I gently declined her plea. I felt that my country and the members of religious minority communities, including Baha'is, who had no opportunity to leave, were in need of individuals dedicated to their welfare. I had actually been inspired to compose a poem after learning of the incarceration of a Baghai friend in Adilabad prison. Some of the verses read, Tonight, I emerge from Adilabad's embrace, a haven for free spirits, butterflies ablaze. Within its towering walls, love's flames consume. Yet spirits soar, greater than this fortress gloom. And so I remained in my homeland. Amid the ongoing upheavals, my father was entrusted with overseeing repairs to the House of the Bab, a sacred site for the Baha'i community. Because of his responsibilities, we found ourselves residing in close proximity to the revered property. And on November 29, 1982, a cadre of Revolutionary Guards descended upon our home. They held arrest warrants for my father and myself. Appalled at the concept of separation, my mother insisted on remaining with us, so they arrested her as well. Our destination? That very same Adilabad prison, no longer just an abstract line in a poem. Within its walls, we faced numerous interrogations, some of mine lasting up to 11 hours. I underwent 4 official summons to formally recant my beliefs. Each time, I persisted in identifying myself as a Baha'i. One particularly unsettling encounter involved a judge who seemed unfamiliar with the doctrines of his own faith. I respectfully referred him to some of the verses in his own holy book, the Quran. A few days later, he brought some additional mullahs, Islamic clergies, in a further attempt to prove my understanding of those verses were wrong. It was likewise unsuccessful. I knew it could antagonize those officials to have a non-Muslim and a woman dare to disagree with their interpretation of Quranic verses. But even knowing it might cause harsh consequences for me, I could not stop myself from politely expressing what I believed to be the truth of those words. Three months after our arrest, my mother was released. What a joy to know she was once again outside the prison walls. What an aching gap she left behind. She was allowed to visit each of us once a week, behind a glass partition. This was how I learned that the authorities eventually confiscated our house and that she was driven out of it. In all the time my father and I were inmates simultaneously, I was allowed to see him on one single precious occasion. He embraced me and I encouraged him to stand firm. He languished in jail for almost 2 years before his turn came to be released. My own emergence from those walls was of a different kind. On June 18, 1983, I witnessed how straight my 9 companions stood, undaunted by the sight of the gallows and the realization that if they did not accept the final offer to recant, these would be their final moments. I took heart from their dignity and lack of hesitation, and I chose to become as the butterfly in my poem, spirit soaring greater than the fortress's gloom.
My name is Mahshid Niroumand. I was born in Saristan, a small and quiet agricultural settlement in the Iranian countryside. The name Saristan means land of cypress trees, but the village is actually famous for the extent and quality of its pistachio production. So, my childhood memories are colored with those uniquely lovely pink and green colors of pistachio nuts and fresh leaves when they first unfurl in spring. In school, I was fascinated by the building blocks of language, not just conventional languages as spoken around the world, but the language of logic. These twin attractions led to my receiving diplomas in English, French, and German, as well as Persian, while fluency in the language of scientific formulas led to my graduating top of my class in physics. But personal hopes and dreams are sometimes drowned in the overpowering flood of world events. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 ousted the Persian monarchy from power and installed a theocracy ruled by Shia clergy in its place. Despite completion of all credits and exams, the University of Shiraz denied recognition of my degree, not because of any unfulfilled requirements, because of my faith as a Baghai. I was left with no official degree, no possibility of working in my field or at my true academic level. Even if I had been inclined to emigrate, this option was legally closed to me, as after the revolution, Baha'is were denied passports. To make ends meet, I became a private tutor. I spent my days teaching young people science, and my evenings and weekends in volunteer service. A quiet and modest life, but productive and meaningful to me. Perhaps a bit similar to the general perception of my childhood village of Saristan. On November 29th, 1982, they came for me. Agents of the regime burst into my family home. They seemed dissatisfied when I did not demonstrate a fearful reaction. Calmly and with a smile, I gathered a few clothes as if preparing for a welcome journey instead of the incarceration that I knew must be waiting. The recollection of my initial interrogation remains vivid. Among other questions, the interrogator referenced my physics degree. When I confirmed my educational background, he revealed his own lack of a high school diploma, emphasizing with apparent enjoyment his power to decide my future. After 26 days, my parents were finally allowed to meet with me for 10 minutes from behind a glass partition. I was elated at that reunion, brief and obstructed though it was. I urged my parents to be patient and resilient in the face of these difficulties. As my incarceration dragged on, I found strength in memorized prayers and quotations from the Baghai writings about the luminous future of humanity and the purpose of human life to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization for the benefit, physical and spiritual, of all, regardless of race, creed, or gender. Surrounded by harsh conditions, I strove to be a source of encouraging support for my cellmates. By nature, I was inclined to a more shy and quiet character, but for the sake of my companions, I pushed myself to feel brave, to communicate more and confidently. Like my Baghai companions, I was forced to participate in repeated so-called guidance sessions designed to convince me of the superiority of Islam and the wisdom of recanting my faith and converting. These sessions were tough because, in truth, I believe that the Prophet Muhammad was a messenger of God, that the Quran is a sacred text, and that the lifestyle it promotes, including daily prayer, giving to charity, emphasis on upright conduct, all contribute to spiritual growth. But I also believe in the fundamental Baha'i principle of equality between men and women, and the concept of progressive revelation. I believe that rather than being the final teacher sent by God to humanity, Muhammad was one of an ongoing succession according to the needs of humanity in different ages, and that Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, is the most recent. I strongly suspected that the guards conducting the sessions would not agree with these 2 points. So I did not even mention them. Because my companions and I had agreed, it was better to avoid anything that might antagonize the prison staff. They repeatedly advised me to convert, and I repeatedly did not act on their advice. I spent 7 months in jail, and then, one summer day, I took my place alongside 9 other Baha'i women who chose, over and over, up to this final time, to remain true to their convictions. With no regrets and 28 years, I presented myself for execution.
My name is Nosrat Ghufrani Yaldaie. I was born to a farming family in Neriz, a central Iranian settlement that is small and humble, yet mentioned all the way back in the administrative archives of ancient Persepolis. My father passed away when I was just 1 year old. When I was 5, we relocated to the city of Shiraz in search of more opportunities. In school, I discovered that I loved to read. Insatiable desire for new material extended to sources including religious texts, and a little later delving into study of Arabic language and literature. I soon found myself teaching others this intricate language. Eventually, I met my future husband, Ahmad. We married and started our family. I also became a member of the Spiritual Assembly of Shiraz. This is a body of 9 individuals serving in a volunteer capacity and elected by secret ballot from the adult membership of a local Baghai community each year. Its purpose is to guide local administrative affairs, as the Baghai faith does not have clergy. It was my fate, however, to be called to this role following the Islamic Revolution in Iran. This meant it drew the attention of the Islamic clergy and made me a target for harassment by the Hojatieh, a group formed in the 1950s for the express purpose of eradicating the Baha'i faith. They stalked and verbally abused myself and other Baha'is in the streets. I endured as best as I could, trying to avoid confrontation and continuing to open my home to other Baha'is who had been driven out of their residences after the revolution. But my efforts to de-escalate were in vain. On October 23, 1982, Revolutionary Guards raided our home. They confiscated my precious books, which required 2 vans to transport away. They arrested my husband, my son Bahram, and myself. My 10-year-old son and 90-year-old grandmother were left behind under strict instructions not to make any attempts to contact us. Those first hours of incarceration were a physical, psychological, and spiritual test. When I refused to provide any information about other members of the Baha'i community, I was subjected to 200 lashes to my back. Afterward, I was placed in solitary confinement for the first of what would go on to become 52 days. I had no knowledge of what had happened to my dear husband, my beloved son Bahram, or the son and grandmother involuntarily abandoned. Interrogations with severe pressure continued, sometimes with repetition of lashes on my back or in the so-called bastinado on my bare feet. Somehow, the memories of my loved ones, the wish to prevent anyone else from experiencing the same treatment if I gave up their names to save myself, the prayers I had memorized and repeated silently to myself, and the knowledge that Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, had likewise undergone the bastinado, all combined to give me the strength to go on. Almost 2 months after my initial arrest, I was transferred to the general ward of Adilabad prison and placed in a cell alongside some other Baha'i women. It took a long time for my open wounds to heal. My court hearing was brief. The Sharia judge resorted to obscenities, insults, and disrespect. I chose to say as little as possible and refrain from any appearance of arguing with him. In February of 1983, the revolutionary prosecutor of Shiraz gathered the detained Baha'is as a group to inform us that the evidence-gathering stage was complete and that nearly all of us had been sentenced to death. Abruptly, one morning in June, 10 of us were removed from the general ranks of prisoners and taken to Chogan Square. We had been given no information on our destination, but it was not difficult to guess the possibilities. My thoughts were filled with my son Bahram, who had been executed only 2 days before. The guards chose to begin with the eldest among us, our cherished friend Ezzat. She calmly rejected the final demand to recant her faith and faced the rope without any attempt to delay. The rest of us bore forced witness to her quiet courage and the indescribable and inescapable sounds of death by hanging. At the next eldest at 46, it was then my turn. With bittersweet feelings of gratitude at having been allowed some life milestones and regret that these would be denied my younger companions, I placed all my trust in the hope that our sacrifices would serve a greater purpose, and I affirm unchanging belief in my faith.
My name is Monia Mahmoudnejad. I was born in Yemen, a beautiful and ancient desert country between the Red and Arabian Seas, but suffering rising unrest and martial law. Because of this, and grief at the loss of my brother who died in infancy due to medical neglect, my parents decided to return to their homeland of Iran when I was 4. Ultimately, it was not their destiny to evade social unrest. 6 short years later, they found themselves trapped in a grip of the Iranian Revolution. I am told I wasn't a quiet or timid child. Outspoken and perhaps a little bit cheeky were the more common descriptions, something my father secretly enjoyed. As I grew older, I started turning more to writing to express my feelings. In the 11th grade, our class was assigned an essay on the quote, The fruit of Islam is freedom and tolerance, and whoever has tasted this fruit has benefited from it. The words had a profound impact on me, as someone who witnessed the lack of freedom or tolerance experienced by religious minorities or women following the rise of Islamic clergy to political power in Iran. I poured my heart into the assignment. My essay began with the statement, "Freedom is a bright word amongst all the shining words that exist in the world," and concluded with the plea, "Yes, freedom is a divine gift. Why don't you let me speak freely as a Baghai?" My teacher sent me to the schoolmaster for discipline, who soon gave up on showing me the error of my thinking and summoned my parents to try and bring me to my senses, as he called it. On the night of October 28th, 1982, when I was 16, there was a commotion at our front door. It was a group of revolutionary agents. They barged in and began an intensive search process of the entire house. Seeing how calm and unresisting parents remained, I stayed on our sofa and continued with my homework in preparation for the next school day. When the guards ended their fruitless search for contraband, they ordered my father and I to leave with them. We had known to expect this possibility from my father, and maybe even my mother. But me? We were astonished. My mother, distraught, pleaded with them that I was just a child. One of the agents retorted angrily, "Look what we found in her room." It was my essay. He continued, "With this kind of writing, she's going to set the world on fire." My father and I were taken to the detention center at midnight. There, we were separated and the interrogations began. They tried to make me disclose names and information about other Baha'i community members using threats and intimidation. For once, I knew to remain silent. I was not aware at the time, but I was only one of about 40 Shiraz Baha'i community members who had been arrested that night. Eventually, I was transferred to a Dalvand prison. With the greatest kindness, my Baha'i companions there did their best to keep up my spirits and take care of me as the youngest among them. Our individual trials were not publicized. They were conducted behind closed doors, were very brief, and lacked any defense lawyers. In January 1983, during a visit to check on me, my mother was also arrested. Our reunion in the cell was bittersweet. So joyous at being able to hug her and spend time with her again. So saddening knowing she would now have to share the hardships of prison. In March of 1983, my sister visited us. Our usual practice was to each kiss our own hand and then hold it up to the same place on the glass barrier between us. But this time, her purpose was the excruciating duty of delivering shattering news. Our father had been executed for refusal to recant his faith. My bond with my father had been very special, and in that moment, I truly felt as if I had lost part of my own physical heart. Intense as my grief was, it somehow created an atmosphere of solidarity and outpouring of compassion
among the large group of prison inmates, regardless of type of religious adherence. Tears flowed freely and emotion ran high, with prayers and poems recited to lift spirits. In June of 1983, we had a sudden reprieve. My mother was unexpectedly released. But elation at her freedom proved fleeting. A mere 5 days later, I, along with 9 other Baghai women, was singled out by the guards and instructed to board a bus. It took us to the gallows erected in a city square. There, one by one, each of my companions was asked a last time to save themselves by recanting their faith. And, one by one, each of them prioritized their belief that their soul would live on over the safety of their physical body, which must perish sooner or later. The guards kept me for last. In that silent and desolate square, it was just me, them, the driver who had transported us, and the earthly remains of my dear and now departed companions. The guards asked me the now familiar question. I thought of my school teacher and classmates focusing on lessons. I thought of my beloved sister and mother who had already experienced such loss. I thought of the remaining inmates of that prison cell I had now left behind in every way. At age 17, I made my last statement. I stepped forward to place the noose around my own neck so that my soul could reunite with that of my father.
He is God, O peerless Lord. Praised be thou for having kindled that light in the glass of the concourse on high, for having guided that bird of faithfulness to the nest of the Abha kingdom. Thou hast joined that precious river to the mighty sea. Thou hast returned that spreading ray of light to the Sun of Truth. Thou hast welcomed that captive of remoteness into the garden of reunion, and led him who longed to look upon thee to thy presence in thy bright place of lights. Thou art the Lord of tender love. Thou art the last goal of the yearning heart. Thou art the dearest wish of the martyr's soul.